بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum. First of all, it's my pleasure to be here with you this evening, and may Allah bless each and every one of you, and may He protect any of your family members and friends who are at Hajj right now, and may Allah Azza wa Jal accept their ziyarah and their Hajj. What I would like to do, just very briefly before passing the mic to my colleague and friend, Steve, is to try to paint a broader picture of what took place going back in time a little bit, and then give a couple of suggestions to you all. First of all, what took place in Sterling Heights on September the 10th was actually something very American. It was something very American, because if you understand the history of this country, that this type of bigotry that's been focused on religious minorities has always taken place. This is the first thing, understand that. Catholics went through it for a very long time into recent American history. Jewish Americans went through it for a long time. Even African Americans who started moving out into suburban areas, opening up churches, met the same type of opposition that our community just faced September 10th. Hundreds of cases have taken place, not just one or two. And that's why I say this is a very American situation that we've gone through. It's not something that is an anomaly. This is why in in the year 2000, there was a federal law that was passed called, it's normally termed RLUPA, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Person Act, that gave legal protection for houses of worship that were opening up, and that communities would try to block those houses of worship opening up using bogus claims such as traffic, such as height that was invoked here, and the most popular one that's used is quote unquote changing the character of the community. This is code language. When they say changing the character of the community, it means basically there's a majority of people who live in a certain area, and there's a minority group who's of a different race or ethnicity, and sometimes different religion that they don't want in that community. So this is code language. This is the first thing. Second thing is, these zoning cases have been taking place all throughout the United States of America, in which organized opposition has stopped proposed Islamic centers and Islamic schools, including here in the state of Michigan. They have taken place in post 9/11 America. More specifically, they've taken place right in the city of Sterling Heights before this project. There were no masajid in Sterling Heights just a few years ago. In the year 2011, the organization I represent actually acted as legal counsel for the first masjid built from the ground up in Sterling Heights, called the American Muslim Diversity Association. The majority of people who pray at that mosque are Sunnis. Their national origin is from Bangladesh, meaning they're non-Arab. The first imam of that mosque originates from South Africa, whose ethnic background is Malaysian, and many of the Muslims there are from a Sufi type of orientation. They're not Wahhabis, they're like Sufis, right? And the same opposition from the Chaldean and Assyrian community, this very vocal group, we won't say the majority, but a very vocal group amongst them, did the exact same thing in 2011 and 2012 that just took place to AICC. It's not new. And in the same year, in 2011, going to 2012 and 13, there was similar opposition in Farmington Hills. When the Islamic Cultural Association tried to buy a school that was closed called the Eagle School that turned into a community center, there were members of the Orthodox Jewish community that were joined by people in the Chaldean community and did the exact same things. They said the exact same stuff. They brought up what's going on in Iraq. They brought up Al-Qaeda because Daesh wasn't as popular, so it was Al-Qaeda that they brought up. And they first brought up things about sleeper cells and all these things, right? Then later on, once they knew and figured out that this wasn't the proper language to use legally that could influence the planning commission because they can't vote down zoning for these things, they start bringing up stuff like traffic and changing the character of the neighborhood. Similar thing that happened at AIC. This is actually something very organized. There is a website and information online of how to stop a proposed mosque. It's online, and it's happened all across the country. Murfreesboro, Tennessee is one of the most famous ones. CNN did a special on it with Soledad O'Brien. I just left Murfreesboro about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and I visited that community in which they had similar types of opposition, and actually when they were building, they had an arson attack in which some of the property and what was used to help to build the structure actually was burned. They had a similar type of situation. What makes this one a little different and what took place with the American Muslim Diversity Association, which actually CARE, we have a presentation there tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. From 10 a.m. to 1, our Presenting Islam to Fellow Americans workshop that we've done for the YMA before in the past, and Steve joined us with that before at the Jamia years ago. But what makes this different, this situation and the one in 2011, is that the other masajid that face opposition, like in Warren, Michigan, before in Hazel Park with the Islamic Association of North America, the Pittsfield Township issue with the Islamic school being turned down for zoning, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, in Chicagoland, in Chicago, Illinois, Texas, all throughout the country, Virginia, in the Richmond area where I grew up at, all of these cities in recent years have had similar issues. What makes this different is that all of those, the opposition were majority white Americans who were evangelicals. When it came to the Sterling Heights issue in 2011, 2012, and this one, the majority opposition came from Chaldeans and Assyrians. Chaldean were the majority. I say, and I was out there, and Sister Samira, correct me if I'm wrong, I say 90% of those protesting, of maybe 300 people, were Chaldean people. I was spit at as well. They didn't like me at all. Actually, one of them had the nerve to say, "Oh, we're surprised at you. You should have been on our side. You're not one of them." Ajib, right? That was said to me. This woman got in my face. So this is what makes this different. Now, we can talk against the bigotry, but it's very important for us also to understand the roots of where this type of animus or animosity comes from, okay? Because I believe that there are two major reasons why people are Islamophobes. The first reason is Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi alayhi, said, "An-nas a'da'u ma jahilu." People are enemies of what they're ignorant of. So many people who come and protest against Muslims, they're just ignorant because all they've seen about Muslimin or what they've seen on TV. 9/11, and it's strange that, that they even had this hearing for AICC the night before 9/11 anniversary. Like, look at the timing, right? But if all people know about Muslims and Islam is 9/11, seeing TV of Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab in Somal, and Daesh, then of course they're going to be scared if they don't have any interaction with Muslims. So this is something that through interaction, there's a chance of this type of animus being changed, and Allah is the changer of hearts. He can change people's hearts. Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabit qulubana ala ta'atik. It's a dua, right? So he's the changer of the hearts. So this is one group, but this group doesn't apply to the Chaldeans, because the Chaldean people have always lived amongst Muslimin. They lived amongst Muslimin. The vice president of Saddam, Tariq Aziz, was a Christian. Saddam gave the money to the Chaldean community to build what's called the Mother of God Church in Oakland County, as well as on 7 Mile, East 7 Mile, the Chaldean Community Center. Saddam gave them over $1 million. Saddam Hussein got the key to the city of Detroit when Coleman Young was the mayor of Detroit. You didn't know that, did you? Saddam Hussein got the key to the city. Saddam Hussein never gave any money to Muslims in America to build any masjids, obviously not Shia, but even Ahlul Sunnah. He never gave any money to establish a masjid, but he gave money to Christians. That's why some Sunnis who I know make a joke, and they call Saddam al-Nasrani, because he gave money to the Chaldean community, right? So they know Muslims. And some of these Chaldean people who are out there, and I talked with some of them and had some interactions, many of the people in Sterling Heights, they're not like the old Chaldean community. See, there's different ways of Chaldeans. There are Chaldeans who came here after 1965, after the Civil Rights Act. The Immigration Act of 1965. This is the 50th anniversary. So they came after 65 in the 60s and early 70s. Then you have the group that came that was displaced from Desert Storm in the early 1990s, which much of the Iraqis who are Shia came during that time, being displaced from Desert Storm. Now you have these new ones who are primarily resettled in Sterling Heights, Chaldeans and Assyrians. And after 2003, after the invasion of the American military and the British military in Iraq, and they were displaced. They were kicked out of their homes, and they didn't have militias to protect them. Shia had militias, the Muqtada al-Sadr and different Al-Hakim's group, different militias. Shia had militias. Sunnah had their own militias like Jaish and Naqshbandiya and these different groups. They had their militias and groups too, and then there was Al-Qaeda there as well. I never refer to Wahhabi terrorists as Sunnis. They're not Sunnis. We shouldn't even say Wahhabis are Sunni. Wahhabis are not Sunnis. Never say that. The head of the Majlis al-Fuqaha of Ahlul Sunnah in Iraq, Dr. Ahmed al-Kubaisi, who's Sunni, said this himself. He said, don't call these people Sunnis. They're not Sunnis. He gave fatwa against Daesh, so don't call them Sunnis. Anyway, these Chaldean brothers and sisters, Assyrian brothers and sisters, were kicked out of their lands. Churches burned down, and Christians are almost extinct in Iraq. This is a reality. Christians are almost extinct. So Many of the people who live in Sterling Heights suffered deep psychological and emotional trauma. They suffered trauma. Many of them have forms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So we have to understand that when we deal with them in Amir al-Mu'mineen, he talked about the concept or the spiritual trait of ta'atuf. Ta'atuf, empathy. So we have to understand and try to put ourselves in their shoes of some of the pain that they may be feeling. It doesn't justify the bigotry, but it will inform of how we then can try to open up a discourse, firstly with their leaders, to get them to address the situation. I believe that the Chaldean community and some of the organizations did a disservice to Chaldeans and Assyrians, because those people who were resettled, they were given housing, English language classes, but overall, many of these refugees, people came here, they did not get proper therapy and mental health services to talk them through their pain. And it's common amongst people who are abused, especially and we know this from psychology. My father's a psychologist, by the way, ilmun nafs. My father has his PhD in psychology and specializes in developmental psychology amongst children. So he's told me that many times children who are abused, either physically or sexually, if they don't get long-term therapy for that, they most likely, percentagely, will become abusers themselves. That's why most people who are pedophiles, the vast majority of pedophiles, are people who themselves were victims of pedophilia. So likewise, I believe that there is a group of people in the community, because they have not dealt with their trauma, they are involved in what's called in psychology countertransference. They're taking the pain that they suffered and are transferring it upon Muslims in Michigan who have nothing to do with what took place in Iraq. The Sterling Heights community, those poor Bangladeshis had nothing to do with what's going on in Iraq. They might know, outside of knowing how to make salah, they may only know 5 words of Arabic. Shukran, afwan, jazakallahu khairan, etc., right? They don't even know Arabic, much less the politics of Iraq. They don't know. Ain't nothing to do with that. AICC, if memory serves me correctly, and I remember when AICC was first started, and I've spoken not recently, but in the opening years, I used to go and speak there from time to time. Majority of people who pray there are Lebanese, they're Lebanese Americans. Nothing to do with what's going on in Iraq. So this is a part of a thing in our activism. We have to be sensitive and understand the points of contention. So our leaders, and even you, when you are discussing these issues with them, is to be sensitive about this. At the same time, we have to be very clear with them and in our discussions that Michigan is not Iraq. As what was mentioned earlier, there are people flying American signs, spitting and saying nasty things about Muslims, singing, "God bless America." The irony of it is, most of what they were invoking actually almost everything they said had nothing to do with Sterling Heights or America. They were talking about Iraq. Okay? So the discussion has to be not centered on what's going on in Iraq, but talking about how we are going to peacefully coexist, and even at times, if we're able to move from coexisting and tolerance to cooperation here in Michigan. Because it's about us having healthy communities here in Michigan and in Sterling Heights. So Iraq is not Michigan, nor is Michigan Iraq. So it's the discussion about how are we going to live in a civil society as people living in Michigan. I believe is the focus. I also have to say this too. I think that some of us in the community have also made a mistake in regards to talking to Iraqis. And as I get older, some of you may have seen me tweet this or I had to get off of Facebook about 3 weeks ago. I got tired of seeing dead Syrian children. Like it literally, I had an anxiety attack. And may Allah help those innocent women and children from Syria who've been displaced by Daesh. It breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart. So we need to, one of the mistakes I've seen us do, or some of us have done, is saying, well, we the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we have been persecuted by Daesh too, and we are the primary ones fighting Daesh. If the conversation about how we're going to live in Michigan is centered on what's going on in Iraq, we lose as a community. We lose. And honestly speaking, just as Muslims in Michigan and Sterling Heights have nothing to do with Daesh, Muslims in Sterling Heights have nothing to do with fighting Daesh or protecting Christians in Iraq, if we're going to be honest. So we don't need to try to play this good Muslim, bad Muslim card. And guess what? Those Chaldeans, and people in the community know it, those Chaldeans who were just pushed out of Mosul recently, you know where they're at now and being protected? They're in the Kurdistan area of Iraq. Who are those Kurdi people who are fighting Daesh? Those are Sunnis. So the discussion about, oh, we as followers of Ahlul Bayt, we're the good Muslims, which infers that the Sunnis are somehow connected to Daesh, that's a bad talking point. That's not a good talking point. So what? So if AICC were from Ahlul Sunnah, they would have made it okay for the Chaldeans to have said the same things and protested against the Jami'? Of course not. It wouldn't have made it right. Again, if the primary focus of our conversation of trying to make things right with the Chaldean community is focused on Iraq, we lose as Muslims, and they lose as Chaldeans and Assyrians, because then the healing process can't really come into fullness of maturation if every time we talk, the centerness of the conversation gets taken off of how we can live together in Michigan, becomes a political debate about what takes place in Iraq. We can't win, brothers and sisters, with the Chaldean community on that ground. Also, we as Muslims of different schools of thought and different ethnicities, and you know that a few months ago, I gave a talk about ethnic relations and race relations in the Muslim community with Sister Rashida Tlaib and Sayyid Hassan and myself. We talked about race relations. Race relations and also cooperation amongst Muslims of different schools of thought is very important. And I'm not sure whether there was outreach, and I'm just, I have to keep it 100, keep it real. So excuse me, this is not meant to be offensive. But if the brothers and sisters from AICC didn't reach out to the Sunni brothers who went through the exact same thing through the zoning and thought they could just do it on their own without getting the advice of the brothers, that would have been a big mistake if that wasn't done. I don't know if that wasn't done or not. But if there was no conversation between the brothers and sisters establishing AICC to understand the landscape and the pitfalls, if there was no discussion between the Sunnah and the Shia in Sterling Heights before putting this project together, that was a mistake. We have to talk amongst each other as Muslims. 'Cause at the end of the day, the anti-Muslim bigots don't care about madhab, and they don't care about ethnicity or national origin. Whether you're Zaydi or Jafari or Hanafi or Shafi'i, or whether your roots come from Lebanon, Bangladesh, or Sudan, to the Islamophobes, we're ummatun wahida. We're one community. In the هذه أمتكم أمة واحدة وأنا ربكم فاعبدون. The Quran says that. Like the bigots see us more as one ummah than we see ourselves as one ummah. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. I know, I mean, you know, this is the truth, brothers and sisters. So we have to get our own acts together as Muslims. And these issues are going to happen again. This isn't the last time this is going to happen. It's going to happen somewhere else when we try to establish another masjid. So we need and care. We're doing this, going to community to talk about best practices when opening up Islamic schools and masajid, because we've seen this so many times. We've litigated this in court. We've intervened between communities to have discussions. So that is the groundwork or behind this, or some of the landscape from my perspective. And may Allah Azza wa Jal forgive me if I said anything incorrect, and may you pardon me if I said anything that came across harsh. But just as much as we're against bigotry and that we have to empathize with other people's pain, we have to organize and get our acts together as Muslims. Wallahi al-Azim. We're not together the way that we're supposed to be, and we pay the consequences for our disunity as Muslimin and Muslimat. With that, I will pass the microphone over to Steve Spicer.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.